colleagues that could not attend this super interesting event. If you think it's worthwhile, just forward it to your colleagues for them to watch it back. And of course, invite them for the next session that will be about also how to cultivate innovative mindsets, but then about collaboration. That will not be held on the 3rd, but that will be held on the 31st of March. We actually released the date already for the 3rd of March, but then we discovered that there is a holiday, the Carnival holiday season ongoing. And while Carnival maybe or maybe not be part of our lives this year, there will be a school holiday, so we decided to move it a bit ahead and put it on the 31st of March. Well, after all those practical things, now to the fun part. Once more, welcome. A special word of welcome for Professor Petru Kersu and Theo van Kessel again here today. Those are the head honchos that lead the conversation about this topic. For today, we designed the session as such that Theo will start with a short presentation on diversity from his perspective and his huge career with APG. After that, Petru will share some reflections on what the presentation of Theo has told you. But especially today, we would like to open up a lot of time for questions from the audience and really get engaged with your questions, your viewpoints, and yeah, your input in this discussion. So please feel free to already put as much as possible your comments and questions in the chat, or make a note of them for yourself. There will be ample time to put them out there to the two head honchos of today. We'll start with Theo. The floor is yours.
Okay, welcome. The last time we had a lot of nice discussions going on, but there was less time to make all this discussions. So now our presentations will be some shorter, so that Petru can lead the discussion afterwards. So I start with a small summarize of what could be the promise of diversity and inclusion. And at APG, it is part of a sustainable policy. And that is that it allows me or the organization to learn from more people, ideas, and more often. So you have to tap in out of more different opinions, different views, different angles. And I personally learned that really can be helpful and create more innovative and better perspectives. But it is hard, and I will tell that about in a few moments. But the acceptance of the thinking differently provides a basis for surviving as an organization in an environment that's constantly changing, and that's what's going on now. Change is a constant thing, and for me it was more easy earlier to work with a homogeneous group, because I really liked those persons, and we had a quite high-performing team. And we had a quite high-performing team because we all had a connection to each other, because we were homogeneous. But after 2 or 3 years, the high performance went down, and it went down because the problems became complexer, and we were fixed in what you say, in a tunnel view, because we didn't have new opinions. So while changes goes on, the problems get complexer, and that's very hard. So the promise is very nice, and Petru last time already told that scientifically it is not proven that diversity means more innovative or better innovative. It only will be if you manage it the right way and use it the right way. And I hope that here you can see that stuff. everyone knows, I think, the difference between diversity and inclusion. I don't think it is the best definition, but someone told diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being invited to dance. And that's what you need. So from our point of view, we say we think that it will be good to have a diverse organization because we will have better performance and better innovation. But you cannot take that for granted. The contradictions that you have to overbring are big, because for myself, I like people who also like football, and I like telling about football. So I have a direct connection to people who are like myself, and that's an unconsciousness that in your brain is that you are mainly looking for equality. And this is, for example, in the hiring process, is a very bad thing. If most of my colleagues said, within 2 minutes, I had a connection with this person. Yeah, great. And why did you have that connection? Because you were on the same school, or you had the same age, or you had the same gender, or you have the same interest, and not because it is the best person that adds something new to your team. The same thing is this person doesn't fit in our culture. That's really exclusive. If you say my culture is inclusive, and then you exclude persons because they don't fit in your culture. And maybe you need those persons to change your culture, because something in your culture is that thresholds you from improving. The third point is recognizing the familiar is more pleasant. The joy of recognition must be in balance with the joy of surprise. So it is not that you always have to only look for differences. You also have to look for something in common, but it should be in balance. And then come something that for me was very hard to accept. I think I'm a very open-minded person. I traveled all over the world. I have friends from all cultures, homosexual, bisexual, young, old, different politics. But sometimes I also say, that's stupid, point. And then I ask, well, what's that within me that makes still some bad feelings about a person possible? So that's from the personal point of view. So within yourself, you have limitations to have a fully open mind. And the same is for your organization, because for an organization, you have one purpose or one goal or one vision you wanna have. And it is very hard to bring people from a different background at the same time to make that they are unity in the organization. I really like the sentence, singing on the same hymn sheet, while still using the power of diversity. And that's a real stupid thing. Even when you talk about mediocrity, you also always want to collaborate with the best persons. And being different, you sometimes think that someone is mediocre because he doesn't have the same drive or the same purpose or the same knowledge as you have, because someone looks from a different window. And so you have to create a safe environment. You have to create common ground to participate in a team, and everyone can play his role. And the last one is when you have diverse people, you also have diverse opinions, and you still have to make a supported decision. And therefore, you need, in my opinion, fair processes that are known upfront, because an organization is not a democracy, and sometimes sometimes you say, I make the decision, I will consult all of you. The other time you can say, we make a democratic decision. Most people for alternative A or B. That's depending on the situation, but you should do that upfront, because people accept a different outcome as that they prefer if they knew that they were heard, they knew that they participated, and they knew that there was a process that was fair for them upfront. So we see that diversity and inclusivity have huge opportunities, but on the other hand, it is very hard to achieve a better performance because we have individual limitations, or because you still have to unify them around a theme or a topic. And for me, in the pictures, I will tell with every picture what we did. We unify the common purpose. For APG, we are a sustainable organization. We work for the long term, and we hope that there will be no poverty among elderly people. So that can be a common purpose in which people from different backgrounds can find themselves back. So we make the why important, we make the what important, and we let participate all of our employees. But we didn't tell something about the how. The how was totally free to our organization after we made clear what was the common purpose. The second thing is that you have to translate the common purpose in KPIs that you will measure, because what you measure, that will be done. But on this part, I want to tell about the KPIs about inclusiveness and diversity. You see that we say there should be a quotum of women in our organization on every level. For example, 1/3 of the participants of the board should be women. When that was used, what we saw is that we had a lot of discussions in our organization. Why should there be a preparation for women? And that was a really stupid thing. But I think KPIs on numbers is not the best part to do. What we got was more women in the board. It also brought a different view on our organization, a more empathic view. It was not only doing the financial stuff okay, but also be good for your people, be good for your environment, be good for, and so on. So that was really an addition to what was in the board before. We also had a KPI that every woman would have at least the same salary as a man. And when we looked to our organization, we saw that more than 100 women had a worse salary than the man who was lowest in rank. So we changed that, and it cost us a lot of money to make that clear. But that made clear that we have an unconscious bias that women don't have to earn as lot as money because they are out for a period to serve the children or to do other things. And with this 100 persons, we didn't find an explanation why they had a lower salary than a man. So that was really strange. So yeah, we adapted that. But then we had a lot of protests for men who said, yeah, but I have more experience, or I have more of this or more of that. And they try to find explanations why that woman should earn less. So it was a very hard point, but for us it was really a changing in behavior. Everyone is equal. We should pay everyone an equal amount of money, and everyone can adapt. And now we see also that in the more technical environments, where we first said, IT is for men, we now see that IT, there are also a lot of women, because IT is also communication and designing and other things. So that was really helpful. To make a team from different persons is very hard, and the best way I think to do is to share experiences, bring them together, do something at the start, and make a team in which trust is not only a buzzword, but trust is really available. The way I always do it is I go to the Ardennes, sit down on a small river, make a fire on the camp, drink a lot of beer, and talk about your experiences, your drivers, your personal best things or your personal bad things. So that you have a common ground and a common understanding of with which people you are working. And mostly when you are in tough times in a program or in a project, you also see that then you can go back to that moment that you celebrate together and say, hey, did you know when we were in the Ardennes, that was a really nice shared experience. And we said that we would fix that. So now put on your shoulders and we go on. The shared experiences you also have in your organization. We have a lot of agile teams. The agile teams are from different perspectives. There's a multi-disciplined teams. And bringing those together causes a lot of distrust in the beginning. So you cannot say work together. You have to make specific roles, but also have that shared experience again. Every day standing up, finding out what's your role and what you can add to your team, and yeah, that is really important. The third thing is make fair processes for decisions, because in a time that's changing very fast, we have to make a lot of decisions. And if a decision, everyone is waiting for a decision for 2 weeks or 2 months or 6 months, that's really poor. Then your organization cannot be in speed. So fair processes up front is very important. And last but not least, you want to innovate, you want to be yourself, you will be yourself, but then you have to feel the trust. And trust is something that's very fluid. It can go away with a bad decision. If you say, I don't like mediocre people, and you sack them, then that can be a distrust in the team, because you said, I could be myself, and now someone is sacked because he was himself. And so you have to make clear that there is a difference between what you add to the organization and who you are from your inside. And last but not least, respect is very important to create that trust. So I think norms and principles and guiding principles are very important to have in your team, so that everyone knows what is the ethical norm we use, what is the way we give feedback to each other, what is the way, how do we help each other, and those norms are a stable part of working together. And then at last, the reward for me, what I think is that every person wants to be a valued member on a winning team, on an inspiring mission. So if you go back, start with that mission, create a winning team, and value the people for who they are and what they participate. This was my story about what I did and felt in our organization. I think we make a lot of progress in the last 5-6 years. that started with the tone from the top. So we want to be different, we accept diversity, but we are unified on the one mission: no poverty amongst elderly people. Are there some questions?
Yeah, thank you very much, Theo. Before Petra takes over, maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience. I see Frauke having already 2 questions in the chat. Maybe Frauke, would you like to ask the question yourself and open up your mic?
Okay. Yep. So I've done quite a few interviews over the course of my career, going from one temporary position to another. And I quite often encountered that people said, like, well, you didn't fit in the team as a reason why they didn't hire me. I wonder whether that's like a good strategy. On the one hand, it might be just like, yeah, if I would be hired, I might get in difficulties with the others in the team. So I could accept that as a possible reason. But on the other hand, I think, yeah, people with slightly different views or different ways of working might actually enhance the team. So I was wondering, what's your point of view there? Like, why might companies have this strategy, and is it actually a good strategy?
Yeah, I learned that it could be a bad strategy, and it started on a business school a long time ago. But I learned that if problems get more complex, you cannot solve them with all persons with the same attitude, the same way of thinking, the same behaviors. So then you have to be open. In most cases, culture or the team can be the problem to achieve your goals. And in that way, you have to open your mind to tap in new ideas or new persons who can help to change that. So for me, I think only looking to the cultural part of fitting in the team is not good, except if fitting in the team will say we make it more diverse and we can solve better solutions. But what do you mean exactly by fit to the team? Is that more from the same, or there's an addition to something we don't have? And if it is an addition to something we don't have, then for me it can be great.
Mm-hmm. So diversity would be particularly good if you have complex problems to solve. So if you just have to collect the garbage, you may just select on people that fit in the team.
But yeah, I think if you do the same way of working all the day, for example, we have service employees who have to do 60 pension retirements a day. Therefore, if you think a lot and will not do the work in a series, then I think you don't have you will not be lucky in that job. So for me, it also have to look if your personal ambitions and you as a personality still have to fit in the characteristics of a job.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the second question I had was about the difference in salaries between women and men. So I was wondering whether that's like a cultural thing or whether it's really because women tend to have career gaps. So is there any studies that looked at like whether this gap still exists if women didn't have children, didn't have caring responsibilities, and worked full-time all of their careers?
It was both. Mm-hmm. And we were surprised because we were not known as an organization that had a different relation with men or women. We thought we are a very open organization and everyone is equal. But in an organization of 3,000 persons in which work 1,200 women and 100 women have a not to explain gap to a man in salary, and not only because of they have children or a break, then there was an unconscious bias that maybe women were not that ambitious, or maybe the managers who are mainly men made choices to appreciate men more than women. We don't know, and that's why we close the gap.
Mm-hmm. And would you think that there's a perception that women are not the breadwinners usually and can rely on the salary of their husbands? That may play a role, that people think, oh, well, the women don't need as much salary as the men.
Of course, but I see a changing perspective. It's not only the man or the woman. I talked myself with my wife, and my wife has a different job, and she said, I like to work 2 or 3 days a week. I don't have the same ambitions as you have. Please go for your career, and I will support you in that. If both are happy with that, then it is okay. But I see with my friends that the wife make the career, and the man is more the one who take care for the children and so on. And in other situations, you see that they both choose for family and to have a career. So I think that more is possible than the traditional thoughts. And the traditional thought I also had. My mother was married with my father, and then she stopped working because she had to take care for the family. If I say to my wife, you have to do that, she said, you are crazy. I'm an individual also, and I also want to live and have some kind of career and have some kind of relationships. So I think this is changing in the whole environment.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the question and the answers. Maybe time to move on to Petru.
Thank you, Peter. And also, Theo, thank you for sharing these experiences, especially the personal ones, because it's really tough, in my view, to get to that disclosure about unconscious prejudices. You know, it's we all would like to portray ourselves as fair, non-discriminative. But the truth is that our mind works really in a different way, I would like to insist a little bit here on a process that is called social categorization, which our mind does automatically. So what does that mean? It means that we have a tendency of putting people, but also more generally things, in categories when we are exposed, when we are perceived, when we encounter these people. So research shows that we use three types of categorizations automatically: categorization based on gender, categorization based on race, and categorization based on age. So these three categorizations or placing people in categories that can be similar to us, as Theo mentioned, or different from us, these categorizations happen automatically. That means we are not aware of those, and we cannot really control the way in which the mind does this us and them. So we very quickly, in the first interactions with someone else, we say, well, is the same gender, yes or no? It's the same age, yes or no? It is the same race, yes or no? And this happens automatically. Now, also research in social psychology shows that when we put others in other categories, you know, a person that we just met, we just say, well, is different from us, discrimination follows immediately. So there were studies, for example, in which people were left to think that or had to distribute some resources, some money to others that were both in the same group, or others that were in my group, and another one in a different group. So what research showed was that when we have to distribute rewards, financial rewards, to people that are in our group versus other groups, we tend to discriminate right away the ones that are in the out group or in the other group. So, you know, really admitting that we engage in this sort of reasoning, it's already an important step, because these judgments are automatic. And the question is not whether we are discriminating others that are different from us. The question is whether we are aware of it. And I would like to also mention here a set of research that was carried out in the 90s, in which particularly important theory emerged in social psychology, stating that these categorization processes are unconscious and prejudice is unconscious. So what, for example, they did in one of the studies, they selected people that really, when they were asked and interviewed, they said, well, we don't discriminate. We don't have prejudice towards other people from other races, you know. And then they put them in a lab, and they gave them a task to do a task on the computer, and then they introduced an experimenter, but that was a confederate of the experimenter actually, and they manipulated race. So they either introduced the person from the same race as the participant, or from a different race than the participant. Now the participant was linked to all sorts of devices evaluating all sorts of reactions, unconscious reactions, you know, at the skin level, and also the facial expressions. And what they discovered is that when incidentally these persons were touched by a person from a different race, they experienced an unconscious reaction they didn't have when they were touched by a person from the same race as themselves. So even for people that really declare that they have zero prejudice, this unconscious reaction to different others happens automatically. Now, that is a problem. That is a problem because that generates discriminative tendencies. And the question then is, how do we solve this problem in real organizational settings? And here, Theo mentioned about these shared experiences and the way in which people get together outside work to generate these shared experiences, and that can be a solution. And that can be a solution indeed. Why? Because it generates a different social category. So from us and them, us men versus them women, us young versus them old, us you know, Dutch from them non-Dutch. All these categories are reshuffled, and by creating these shared experiences, we conceive ourselves as part of the same group. You know, it can be an organizational group, it can be a department, it can be a company. So we call that the recategorization process. And in scientific research, the process was labeled as moving from categorization in us and them to decategorization. So we say we don't use those categories anymore, to recategorization, saying yes, we are all Dutch, non-Dutch, old, young, men, women, with all these differences. We are part of a department, we are part of a group. So that recategorization process really works in practice, and it was used extensively in trainings. It was used in diversity awareness training, so how they were called. So I really like the fact that Theo mentioned this way of bringing together a group of different people by creating shared experiences that will allow them to think of themselves not as, you know, different sexes, different genders, different ages, different nationalities, but rather as together in sharing a common vision about the task, sharing a common vision about what the organization has to do, and that creates another identification process that really makes the team work properly. So I particularly like this part. So starting from the personal disclosure to really illustrating on how we really can work with diversity in organizational settings. Now, I don't know whether you have reactions so far to this discussion on the unconscious biases and the way in which we can deal with them. So certainly, the first and most important step is to really become aware that these biases are unconscious, and we all have we all have them. So the question is not whether you have them or not. Our mind really evolved that way to make categories. Why is it important to operate with categories? Because we save mental effort. We cannot really understand the full complexity of the world we are living in. So then the mind kind of puts order by creating categories. So we are not processing the whole diversity of people we met. No, we just say, well, we see here men and women. So suddenly, from the huge diversity that we are exposed to, we just say, well, we just do categories, and all men are the same, and all women are the same. And that's a mental process that saves energy and saves computational resources that our mind really doesn't have enough to comprehend the whole complexity of life. So that is the way in which the mind evolved in dealing with that complexity, and that categorization is there all the time. Okay, some questions at this stage?
And maybe first of all, thank you very much, Patrick, for this super interesting reflection. Yeah, if there are any questions, just raise your hand or put them in the chat. I see another question coming in from Frauke. Do you wanna pose it yourself, Frauke?
Okay, I had a comment at the end. So there was this Danish modeler for the COVID cases, and there was like the first picture of the interview. I saw a man and a woman, and I immediately thought, oh, the man must be the modeler and the woman must be the interviewer, and which was just the other way around. So I have that as well. So just noticed it myself. So yeah, you mentioned three aspects: age, race, and gender. Age is often difficult to estimate in people, so people underestimate my age usually, for example. So I wonder, like, do people rely on that aspect a bit less than the other two, which are often more easily recognized in people?
Well, yeah, you are right. We are not talking about the accuracy here, because stereotyping is very often kind of disconnected from the accuracy judgment. So you stereotype people and you make judgments that are not necessarily accurate. So when you have this stereotypical judgment of gender roles, for example, and you put women in a category and men in a category, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are accurate in inferring and attributing qualities to these two groups. So we're not talking about accurate judgments, but rather a tendency that really positioning yourself as in the same group or not with the person you're perceiving. It doesn't matter, because also if you look at the judging the age across races might differ. So we are, for example, more accurate in judging the age for people that belong to the same race as ourselves than to people from different races. So the accuracy is not really a matter here. Of course, there is research showing that some of the stereotypes we have are actually accurate. So, for example, there is a nice, interesting paper published in 1994, Jude and Parks about the stereotypes Americans will have about Germans as being colder and more distant. And actually, that's based on interpersonal distance. That's an accurate evaluation. The stereotype is actually reflecting something that is accurate. But anyway, the working of the mind in terms of accuracy of these judgments is not really relevant. The point is, we make these judgments, and we make these artificial, sometimes categorizations that will lead to discriminative practices, and that's the most concerning part, I believe.
So you can also take advantage then, obviously, like if I dress up more like a woman or less than a woman, I can influence how people perceive me, or if I dye my hair in order to look younger or something like that.
Yeah, but that's true. But also what I think we have to take into account here is you pointed towards this sort of role expectations. If you have a model, probably that's the man, or so if you have somebody that looks like an IT specialist, that would be that would be probably a man. These are stereotypical expectations that we have for occupations that people have. Now, some interesting research recently showed that in cultures that really emphasize this social equality, gender equality, for example, like the Nordic countries, apparently the segregation of gender-specific preferences for roles accentuated, and it's larger than in cultures in which you would not expect such a segregation. You would expect such a segregation to occur simply because you have less equal social practices. So there is this second layer of role preferences based on social category that actually is at play. So that's something that's worth considering. Now, a second dimension, yes.
Oh no, and I thought, yeah, for my second question is like, how can you reduce the role of these biases? So I see someone asked about job interviews, and I had a question about job evaluations, for example. So like student evaluations tend to be lower for females than for males, even if you experimentally make that's like no real difference between the two. So just like chatting or feedback, and then just either putting a female or male name on it, and then the female still gets lower evaluations than the male. So yeah, how can you take into account those biases, or like make that, yeah, that they don't influence, say, pay or promotion chances or things like that?
A very good point here, and also I think Theo pointed towards awareness as one of the ways in which you can really fight these biases. It all starts with the awareness, with the fact that we have to be aware that these biases are at play every single time we interact with someone. There is research on the first impression formation, for example, that shows that in the first 30 seconds we see another person, we really make judgments that most of the times are accurate about the other person. But so this tendency of judging others these ways of judging others are automatic. So that's the first thing. You have to be aware that you have a tendency of making these judgments. It all starts with the awareness. The second element, and it was also mentioned by Theo, is norms. Have norms, have rules. Okay, we have an interview for a selection. We have to see what rules do we follow in evaluating the candidate. Aren't we shifting criteria when we're talking about a woman? Do we use the same criteria that we use to judge the man in the interview? So the norm should be clear. Okay, the criteria is the task performance. Did we apply that criteria systematically to all the candidates, or unconsciously, when we interviewed women, we focused on other things like family and some other types of obligations that are actually aligned with our role expectations for a women kind of roles than typical family roles than for a man, for example. So that's another element. And the third element, so be aware, use clear norms, rules for judging candidates in interviews. And third is the idea of processes, and also Theo mentioned these very well. So have processes in place in which you stop and reflect. So you are doing these job interviews, and you're interviewing a variety of candidates, and at a certain moment you have to just stop and say, let's now think of the likely biases that we certainly had. So the question is not whether we had those, how bad it was. And stop and reflect, and you really put things in perspective, and that's really not an easy thing to do if you don't have a structure. And that structure of using the same ground rules, using the same steps in evaluating someone, so the norms and processes will be something that everybody can use in job interviews. And not only you have to use the same things in performance appraisals, and you know, some of you might be involved in personnel in performance appraisals with your subordinates maybe.
Pedro, Pedro, can
yeah.
I have a small addition?
Yeah.
I agree with all the things you said, and above that, what we also do is we create a hiring team that is diverse, and we have in advance the fair process how to decide the right candidate. And by having a diverse team in itself, you also have some challenging powers within the team to be aware of the biases and how you can solve that.
Thank you. There's also coming in a question from Mark, but I think it was super related to what was discussed right now. Do you have a follow-up question on that, Mark, or is it completely answered for you?
Yeah, I was typing a question there as well, so I better answer. I mean, when it comes to, basically what you're also saying is that the pitfalls that you might run into related to that bias is something you simply put on the table. Basically, you then challenge yourself and the colleagues in the process
Exactly.
to basically talk to each other about the risk that do we have this opinion because it's a lady? Do we have this opinion because it's a German, because he's black, because he's Chinese, whatever? Is that what you openly then discuss in that process? I'm really looking for some tools to basically address within the team and also the performance review team to have this discussion and challenge yourself as a team on these common pitfalls, and make sure that this bias anyway pops up and that it's addressed. Is that how you do it?
A very good point, Mark. I mean, it's easy to say, yeah, you admit that you are subjective to this discriminatory judgments, but that's actually not easy, because we don't want to think about ourselves, and we don't want to present ourselves to others as prejudiced individuals. So it's very difficult in a team setting to just say, well, now we will stop and reflect how biased our decisions were. We don't discuss if, because the if it's sorted out. Science shows that that's always the case. The question is not if, but how bad was it? And that would be a climate of security and safety that people have to experience in order to engage in these sort of reflections. So you cannot just throw it in the group and say, let's see now how bad were your judgments influenced by your prejudices, because people will become defensive. Nobody wants to be a bigot, and we don't want to, especially in social settings. We want to be fair. But then you have to create that safe environment in the group, that climate that is also valuable for feeling included in the group, irrespective of what. And then people can talk, and that's not trivial. That's not easy to do. I see some now. I open the chat as well, so I see the questions are pouring in. Peter, will you do the management, because I don't know where we.
I will. So I think the order was pretty hard to keep track of, but Gerard, Eliane, Dennis. So let's see. Here we go. In view of time, let me just read out the question of Gerard. Do you have suggestion how to make those colleagues aware of their biases and judgments? I think we touched upon it a little bit just a moment ago. It appears to be a very sensitive topic that is difficult to address among colleagues. Maybe my suggestion would not call it shortcomings, but say natural mechanisms. Yeah, you touched upon it a little bit, Petrus. Something to add there?
No, I really think one way of dealing with this is really to have these stop and reflect moments.
Yeah.
And so you don't just conclude an evaluative meeting, especially in personnel selection or personnel evaluation, performance appraisals, if you are involved as a team or even individually, without asking yourself, how much was my judgment based on similarity perception rather than facts? And asking this question is a helpful way of really extracting those incidents, those moments, those elements that were actually not aligned with the performance appraisal criteria or the selection criteria that we wanted to use. We will see, for example, that when we judged a woman candidate, we just shifted the criterion. Suddenly we started using something else.
Interesting.
Eliane?
You're on yourself, Eliane.
I'm sorry, not a question as such, but alongside engineer and lawyer, I'm also a mediator. And as in my mediation role, I often have the opportunity to use some kind of interview techniques to make people aware about the consequences of the things they want or they do or they say on the other person. So, and my experience is that it's also a question of how good do I know myself? So not what am I, but who am I? And what do I want? And sometimes everybody has good intentions and is not so much aware about the consequences of his attitude or things he does on the other person. And biases is something which is underwater. It's always there. So if we are getting aware about that, then you are able for yourself to see, okay, what could I do then? So what is the effect of what I do and what I find, what I say on the other persons? And then it can start a process in each person itself to say, okay, well, this is not how I want to be. I want to change this. I don't want to be, I didn't know that this was the effect on the other persons. And I didn't mean to do that, but it just happened. And I think this is a process which is integral with all the things that has been said today, to make sure that it must come from the inside of people themselves. And yeah, from my experience, I'm 54 now. And the time when I was around 30, there was the question, do I get this job? Because everybody knows, oh, she's a woman, she's 30 years old, she will have children. So I experience how bad that can be for yourself and how hard you start working and working and working and working and overwork yourself. So this is not a good thing. So it would all for the new generations, it would be good if we leave that situation, and not only for the women, also for the men, because women also have biases of men, and sometimes they don't speak about that, but on the water they are there. So I think for both sides, it's good to make sure that we know those biases and have an open dialogue about that, and a good interview technique might help with that. So it's not a question, I just wanted to add something to this for this group.
Very, very good points, Eliane. And I have two reflections here very quickly. Indeed, we are not talking about just men who have this prejudice. So we did many years back a study with with the personnel selection task. So we just informed participants that they have to select between two CVs, and in one condition we just said, well, these are the CVs of two men. So we asked people to choose, and they did. And then we said that it was a 60-40 preference. So 60% of the respondents preferred one CV. We took that CV and called and just changed the name, and we labeled it as a woman. And we gave it to another group and said, make your pick. Simply shifting the gender of the person shifted the preference. So now the man was preferred. So the least preferred CV in the first round was now the most preferred because it was a man. We didn't change anything else. So we sent the paper for review, and they said, yeah, but in your analysis you just use men. How about women? We didn't even cross our mind to check it with women, but then off you go. You do a second study in which you use the same procedure and you just have women participants. The preference shift increased to 70-30%, and that's about women having stereotypes towards other women in management positions. So we're not just talking about men as as being bigots and discriminative pigs. It's a human tendency of putting others in categories in working with role expectations. And the second element that I would like to point out, and I know we're approaching time here, we talk about the personality the tendency of being sensitive to others, social sensitivity that some people have to a greater extent than others, and that you cannot really change. But then you can create a context in which this sensitivity can be forced in a sense. Peter, it's 11 o'clock, so I have to leave it with you here. I would have many things to still say, also reflecting on Theo's points, especially the ones with the fairness.
Yeah,
but I think
we can conclude that we can go on for hours on this. It's a very interesting topic. That's also what you see coming back in the chat and in the reactions from the audience. But we have to stop now. Unfortunately, time is up. Fortunately, we'll continue the dialogue on the 31st of March. So what I put in the chat already, everyone that's registered for this one will receive an email with the invite for the next one. And there we'll see you again, Petru and Theo, and I hope a large part of the audience as well. Thank you much for joining, and a special thanks to Theo for his presentation and Petru for the reflections and all your answers and all the questions and answers that were given during this session. Have a great day, and hope to see you soon. Stay safe.
See you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Enjoy your day.